wrapping up minicamp last week. Parsons in the house, but not much participation as he awaits a new contract, of course. The league's highest paid pass rusher, Myles Garrett, did some advocating for Parsons to get a new deal over the weekend. Listen to this.
He can deserve whatever he's earned. I mean, the guy's special. Fortunately, I got the chance to train with him. And, you know, I've seen his work ethic. I've seen how he attacks the way he's running. You know, he's 100% committed to his craft and getting better every day. And someone who produces on the field and has that level of dedication, to the game. You should get every penny he's owed.
I love that Myles did that, by the way. Jets, what is the latest that you're hearing on the Cowboys with Micah? Where do we stand here?
Quite honestly, it sounds like Myles Garrett should just be his agent and step in and try to have some of that same talk with the Cowboys, because there still really isn't the type of movement that we would expect at this point. I will say that we spend so much time talking about the Cowboys' contract situations. Generally speaking, they do wind up getting done mid to late summer. I know it feels like it should have been much sooner than that, and perhaps it should, but we still do have time, obviously, before training camp. You know what's funny? I actually have some stats between Micah Parsons and Myles Garrett. Micah Parsons, the last 4 seasons, 251 pressures compared to Myles Garrett's 216. So significantly more there. 310 pass rush wins to 286 of Myles Garrett, significantly more there. You can understand why Micah Parsons is looking at this saying, I'm going to get that big money and I'm going to not get a penny less.
Yeah, I mean, he will, right? But it's just the timeline here for sure. RC, Micah isn't the only question with this defense. They also, as a reminder, have Matt Eberflus as their new defensive coordinator. Lots of turnover with personnel. How much different do you see this Dallas defense being this year?
I think it has to be a ton different, Laura. Listen, Matt Eberflus, for all his faults as a head coach in Chicago, is really good at getting defense to play high-level football. And that's going to start with stopping the run and physicality up front for these Dallas Cowboys. We know what Micah can do rushing the passer. We've seen them with Dan Quinn 2 years ago and years before that being able to turn the football over. But it was physicality that always beat this team, especially late in the season. So how can Matt Eberflus get them to play tight and difficult and physical up front in the middle with the defensive tackles and the middle linebackers? If he can do that, he knows what he has on the back end and he knows what he has on the outside as well. Well, as long as you get Micah Parsons' side.
It's a great point, RC. Look, when Dan Quinn was there, he became a head coach because he had done such a good job with how hard the defense played. And then I think when you look at what happened, the switch to Mike Zimmer, it just didn't go well. And look, there are teams, plenty of them, even in the division. The Eagles, lived through it, where a coordinator change can have a big impact on your team, positively or negatively. And RC's right. They were smaller, they were lighter inside. People ran the ball on them, they got physical with them, and that was a problem. So, look, I do think that will change. And, yeah, Micah Parsons is a big part of that. But we're going to see Micah Parsons as a guy that's rushing the passer. I mean, ultimately, I think that's what Dallas wants to have him do. It's why Jeff read the stats that he read. That's how he impacts the game the most. But in order to have the opportunity to rush the passer, you can't be getting pushed around in the run game on early downs.
But also, too, right, that's when the Dallas Cowboys were good. Think about early on in Dak's career with Ezekiel Elliott. They were physical on both sides of the football. It wasn't about this finesse and let's make this run and shoot. It was about let's run the ball offensively, stop the run on the defensive side, and win these games by making plays in critical situational football moments. Now you think about the offense. You have George Pickens. You have CeeDee Lamb. You brought in 2 veteran runners. You feel like you've gotten better up front. They need to go out and establish the run, be big in the play action game, and do the same thing defensively. Be physical up front and rush the passer in sub-package and third down situations. If they can do that with Brian Schottenheimer, who's seen a team with physicality win games, if you remember with Mark Sanchez and the New York Jets, if he can make that culture switch, I believe that's the way the Dallas Cowboys find a way to be competitive, and then Dak Prescott takes that next step of making big plays in big moments.
And maybe I'm a prisoner of the moment right now, but even just hearing what what Schottenheimer's talked about, a little more shifts and motions in this offense, some things that add a little more creativity to it. We were begging for that last season, the last few seasons, so it feels like they're on that right track, and RC just laid it all out there. That's what they should be doing. All right, the Dolphins seem to be headed in the right direction ever since Mike McDaniel took over as head coach. Over the last 3 seasons, look at this. They ranked top 10 in points and yards per game, plus they've made the playoffs in 2 of the last 3 years. Over the previous 12 seasons, for reference, the Dolphins had only made the playoffs once. Recently retired Dolphins O-lineman Teron Armstead had some thoughts on his former head coach this morning, though.
This year, Mike McDaniel specifically, it's time. It's time to go win. You know, he's come in with an innovative offense. He's made football look different. It's been fun, and I think he's learned. You know what I mean? He came in as a rookie head coach when I got to Miami. And over these last 3 years, he's took a lot of bumps and bruises. He took some scars and wounds, and he's learned. So now it's time to really show the world, and I fully believe in him.
Context there, too, that Tua's obviously been injured during some of this time. But RC, is Armstead right here?
Well, one, it feels like Mike McDaniel, or it sounds like he's been a UFC fighter, not an NFL head coach. I mean, the man's taking bumps and bruises. It's been really difficult for him down there in Miami, but he is right? Like, this is the year he has to show us there's a counterpunch to his offense. You know, early on, the shifts, the motions, the timing, I believe all of those things were sort of new and innovative, but now these defenses see those things week in and week out. There has to be a level of physicality to their run game. It can't be all smoke and mirrors. And also some of the timing things that Tua is so good at is also being things that are getting caught on to by the defenses. He has to have something else to add to this team this year, or in a division that could be getting better, but that Buffalo runs, they could find themselves falling out of the pack and not being a playoff contender at all.
Yeah, look, it's a great point. There needs to be growth, right? Because I think we probably could all agree that Mike McDaniel took over in Miami, and he really has overachieved. When he got there, there were people saying that really Tua, was not a starting quarterback. And under Mike McDaniel's leadership, he's led the league in passing. And yeah, he's been injured. Yeah, there've been, some things they've had to adjust to. But like the fact that they've found themselves as a playoff team, at times, under his leadership, look, to me, is overachieving based on the roster that he took over, and he was creative with it. And he was so creative that the rest of the league started, copying stuff that he was doing. All that to say, look, you're in a division that outside of the Bills, you should feel really good about how you can compete in the division because of where the other organizations are. And if that's the case, then like the next step is, okay, like sweep the Jets, do the same thing against New England, be really competitive against Buffalo, and find an opportunity to win in the postseason. So look, that's where they are. And I think RC's point about getting a little bit better somewhere else. Maybe it's because you're more physical. Maybe it's because you can turn the ball over more. Like something else, where it's, to give you an edge against teams that, quite honestly, from a personnel perspective, are better than the Miami Dolphins.
Yeah, I've known McDaniel for a long time, and one thing I'll say about him is that he's always been very adaptable, and I think that's a very underrated quality in a coach. He is a young head coach, as Armstead pointed out there, and I think he can recognize the flaws of his team in past years, not the least of which are some of the narratives that exist, like, are they a tough enough team? Do they have enough bruisers in the trenches? Can they handle cold weather? Like, he doesn't just cast those things aside and say, whatever, we're fine, we'll just plow through it. He does change, and I think that I've seen from him this offseason the willingness to do that. They're trying to get much tougher up front. He believes this offensive line will be better than any other year before this one. Listen, when he was with the 49ers, he was a run game coordinator. He's the reason Deebo Samuel became a running back. He was the one who went out and found Deebo and said, this guy can be a running back. He can think like that, and I think that that's going to be an important quality going into this season, to make sure that he doesn't stay in his tunnel vision, and I think quite clearly he is